In my book, Holy Shift, the very first section is kind of like, who is this guy? And that may be where you're at. Maybe your lead pastor said, you gotta watch this video series, and you're a volunteer in your church, and you're thinking, okay, great, but what's the deal? This guy's sitting on a rock in a field of dandelions. What's the story? So here's the scoop. I never set out to lead a local church. And it's nuts because we started Life Church here in Michigan back in 2013, and it's now the 11th fastest growing church in America, which is nuts because I'm the world's worst pastor. Okay, I grew up as a pastor's kid in rural Iowa where we've got pigs, farmers, corn, that's about it. There's not a whole lot rocking and rolling in Iowa. And I grew up in a very traditional mainline congregation. You know, we had the robes, the choir, you know, the whole peace be with you. It was Presbyterians, which, interesting side note, if you take the letters in Presbyterians and rearrange them, it spells Britney Spears. Go figure. Anyhow, I was in church all the time, got confirmed, the whole 9 yards, but just really wasn't into it. I just saw it as a bunch of traditions and rituals and do this, don't do that. So as soon as I graduated high school and I could afford a full tank of gas, I headed to the nearest metropolitan city that I could find, which was Chicago. That's right, I loved Chicago. Chicago was the place where I was going to school full-time, studying theater at Columbia College. Did you know that Pat Sajak from Wheel of Fortune is an alumni of Columbia College? That's right, I'm staying in good company, right? And then I also auditioned for and got into a comedy theater called Second City. I would work there, I would train there. I would do anything I could to be around up and coming comedians. I just wanted to eat, live, breathe it. I'd make pizzas, sweep floors, seat people, whatever I had to do so I could learn the tricks and trades of improv comedy. Now, if you don't know what improv comedy is, go on YouTube and search for Whose Line Is It Anyway? Basically, it's when you get a bunch of people, throw them up on stage in front of a live audience with no script, no preparation. You just get a suggestion from the audience and boom, you make it work. Improv comedy is the process that lots of writers use when they're writing screenplays for movies, television shows. It's Saturday Night Live. In fact, the original cast from SNL were all hired out of the Second City, which is the birthplace of improv comedy, been around for about 60 years. All the famous names you've heard of, from Joan Rivers to Bill Murray to Mike Myers to Tina Fey, they all learned how to become funny by going through the Second City Conservatory program, which is where I was at, 18 years old, fresh out of high school. And I loved it. I was eating and breathing this stuff. And if I can name drop, one of my teachers at that time was a then unknown Tina Fey. Yep, it's true. I know Tina Fey. She doesn't know me. She would know my face, but not my name. Anyhow, I was loving seating people when we would have these packed out, sold out nights at the main stage. I remember one night we had a ton of people that were wanting to get inside. In fact, this story I want to share with you, I had the opportunity to share it a few months back in front of a huge conference full of church leaders, movement leaders just like you. So check this out as I share the story. And I remember one night, there was a line out the door of tourists wanting to get into the show. My job that night was to get people seated. So I ran to the manager. She hands me the next ticket. There's a couple. I say, come follow me. And as I'm taking them to their seats, I realize that they have the best seats in the house. So I look at them, and I first noticed the lady because, you know, I was a testosterone-filled 20-something male, and she was hot. Blonde hair, blue eyes, suction cupped into her dress, hot. And then I looked at her date. He was not.
He was this big guy, sweaty, his shirt was untucked, and so she's hot, he's not, and I grew up watching Sesame Street, so I felt like I was watching one of these things is not like the other. It was this guy. I'm going, how did he meet up with her? Did she lose a bet? Are they cousins? What happened? So I say, follow me. I'm taking him to the seats. They got the best seats in the house. I pull out the seats. She sits down. He sits down. And then as you're about to seat them, you're supposed to look at the last name on the ticket and say, thanks for coming to Second City, Mr. Heron. So I pulled out the seat. The big guy sits down. Jabba, I called him. And I said, thanks for coming to Second City, Mr. Farley. And I realized this was Chris Farley. You guys know who Chris Farley was? He was in the movie Tommy Boy. He was living in a van down by the river. Everything I aspired for as a young 20-something, fame, fortune, women, it was sitting right there. So I go back to the manager and she says, hey, John, Mr. Farley's here blowing off steam at intermission. We don't want autograph hounds bothering Mr. Farley, so you, John, are going to be Chris Farley's bodyguard. I don't know if you've had a moment, ladies, to see this rippling bicep. I work out. No, if I were a superhero, I would be Captain Toothpick. I am not a bodyguard. And so at intermission, I said, come and follow me, Mr. Farley. And he didn't know my name, but he knew my face because I get mistaken for Jeremy Piven all the time. I know you were thinking about it, right? Over here, you're thinking Dave Matthews because you're, I was like, so I take Chris Farley to the other room. I'm like, can I get you a water bottle? And over the next several weeks in the fall of '97, I have a front row seat to a comedy legend. He keeps coming in. I am always assigned to be his right-hand man. One night, he came in with a bunch of friends, and I thought, oh, wow, being rich and famous means that you're popular, until he sat down and whisked out $100 bills, and everybody scattered. And I thought, that was weird. But I was all about bragging to my friends back home in Iowa. This is before we had smartphones, back in my day, in the 1900s. So I said, I'm going to get a picture with Chris Farley to prove I know this guy. I went to Walgreens. I got one of those Kodak disposable cameras. Remember those way back in the day? And we had this Christmas party on a Monday night in December of '97. It's VIPs, staff only. Chris Farley comes in. He sees my face. He's like, hey, man. He's drunk, smells horrible, selling crack cocaine in the kitchen to employees. But I wanted to impress my college buddies who came with me, so we all crowded together in this small office, and we were laughing and joking with Chris, and we took a photo, and this is the photo that we took. That's me when I had hair. I'm going for the Apostle Paul look, people, okay? Don't judge. And there's some of my friends, and in the back, you see on a Monday night in December of '97, a drunk, high as a kite, Chris Farley. Well, we didn't have instant photos back then. I had to go to the 24-hour Walgreens. You get my film developed, not even in an hour. 3 people. You know, Jesus was risen in 3 days. So in 3 days, I'm going to get my photos. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning, I walk into my college class. That day, I'm about to pick up these photos. My buddy walks in and goes, hey, Heron, did you hear about Farley? And I said, yeah, I just partied with him 2 nights ago. And he said, no, did you hear about Chris Farley? They just discovered his body in the John Hancock building. And so 2 nights after that photo was taken, Chris Farley was with a hooker. He was overdosing. He falls on the floor convulsing. And instead of calling for help, this woman of the night steps over his body, takes her money, and leaves. As a young 20-something, that shook me up. Yeah, I grew up going to church, but you know, there was a pile of dust on my little student Bible I got at confirmation. I didn't know what to think except that everybody dies. Money doesn't save you. Popularity, being the funniest class clown does not save you. We all die. And I'm in the theater world where there's a diversity of different beliefs, agnostics, atheists, Muslims. I just didn't know what to believe. This is before the internet. So I had to go to the library and start reading all the books of the faith. I read the Quran, the Book of Mormon, and it was 1 Corinthians 15 that grabbed my imagination. Scholars say 1 Corinthians 15 is the earliest written gospel account where Paul says, let me tell you, brothers, about this great news. Jesus came, he died, he rose, he was seen by 500 eyewitnesses. And then Paul said something that made sense to this knucklehead. He said, if Jesus has not been raised, then this whole thing is a joke. You and I are no better than Amway. We should pack it up and join the mosque down the street. But if Jesus is alive, that changes everything. And no joke, after I read that, I went to the nearest bookstore, the Moody Bible Institute bookstore, bought the first book that I saw, and it was Lee Strobel's Case for Christ. I'm not here to kiss butt. I'm here to say that I would love to meet Lee. If you hear a shriek of joy later, it's me seeing him. Ah! No, that book changed my life. And suddenly I was like, I'm not about trying to get to SNL. Because Jesus is God, the Bible is true, hell is hot, forever's a long time. I just want to reach the lost at any cost. And so if you're wondering, how did this little startup 6 years ago with no denominational affiliation, no nothing, how did this blow up? Dude, we are kites in God's hurricane, but 21st century church leadership is about laughter and love. Make them laugh. I married my high school sweetheart. She wanted to get her master's in clinical counseling at a seminary in Ohio. And I said, well, I'm not going to be the dumb one. I'm going to get a master's too. And that was my calling in ministry. And 19 years later, after doing youth ministry, we're just on this rocket ship ride, seeing teens, 20-somethings, 30-somethings coming to Christ. It's unbelievable. Our way of connecting as missionaries to Gen Z is to make them laugh. Seriously, comedy clubs are packed, our pews are empty. The website Funny or Die gets millions of hits every month while you and I struggle to get 10 people to visit our church website. Make them laugh. Laughter is universal. Laughter reduces the force fields. And so we use principles of improv comedy at lifechurchmichigan.com. My trajectory completely changed. I still finished up my college degree in theater and I graduated from Second City. But here's the interesting thing. 2 blocks away from the Second City where I worked and studied was a church, a very famous church, the Moody Church, named after its founder, D.L. Moody, who in the 1800s was a shoe salesman who felt his heart just wrecked to reach people who don't normally darken a church door. And so I found myself starting to go to the evening service at Moody Church, and then I'd hop on over to Second City where I would work, and God started to birth something inside me. After I was, consumed by 1 Corinthians 15, I went to the bookstore, the Moody bookstore, saying, okay, what do I need to read? What do I need to learn? And on the end cap was a brand new book called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And that book changed everything. When Lee Strobel laid out, here's the history, the science, the archaeology behind the claims of Christ, I was in. I was excited. I said, I want to tell as many people as I can about Jesus. So I married my high school sweetheart. We finished up school in Chicago. We both went to seminary in Ohio and jumped into youth ministry. Learned a ton serving under some amazing senior pastors like Perry Noble at New Spring Church. And long story short, in 2013, God saw fit for us to launch youth ministry for adults. That's what we do here at Life Church. And you can discover more about our journey at lifechurchmichigan.com, where God has just blown this thing up from a handful of friends to 1,200 people who call Life Church home. This past year, Lifeway Research and Outreach Magazine named Life Church as the 11th fastest growing church in America. That's just crazy because we don't claim to know that what we're doing would work everywhere. We don't claim to be experts. In fact, we'll be the first people to say, here's what not to do. But along the way, we've discovered
that using principles of improv comedy applies to creating sermons, to doing ministry, to working together as a staff ensemble. And that's why I'm excited about the journey you're on, making a holy shift. In fact, when you read my book, Holy Shift, you'll see it's really telling you how Life Church came to be, how we took some of the ideas from Saturday Night Live and creating something out of nothing to birth this beautiful mess, this ministry of 20-somethings, 30-somethings, people who wouldn't normally go to church. And you don't have to be funny, you just have to start to think funny. And let me ask you this question. This is a great question for you to journal through if you're by yourself, or if you're watching this video series as a team, as a board. This is a great discussion question. What would you do if you weren't afraid anymore? What steps of faith would your church take if you weren't afraid of failure? Because once you can make that shift, you're ready to start thinking funny and using humor over hammer.